Jared isn't the worst thing to come out of Subway. This world is a strange one. Subway has surpassed McDonald's as the world's biggest fast food chain, with nearly 45,000 stores versus Mickey D's 36,500. It's got quite the lead, but that's not necessarily a good thing. More locations means more customers, sure, but more customers means more robberies, more freaks, more weirdos, all of which threaten everyone around them. Tonight, I have some allegedly true Subway scary stories to share with you. But first, I'd like to hear your search and rescue stories or first responder stories, so if you've been out there saving lives, I'd love to feature your story in a future video. Your creepy ones, that is. Just go to deathbyfear.com. Thanks. Now, number 1. Jared. Nah, I'm just kidding. Number 1. Across the Bane. Submitted by Caleb Sharp. Not too long ago did I work at Subway, my first paying job that I would grow to hate. I needed the money though, and the thought of facing customers finally broke me out of my shell. I guess in a way it did. I got the job around late April of 2016. My brother-in-law and sister had been wanting me to get a job so I could break out of my depression and hopefully alleviate some stress. At that time, my grandmother had a vicious stroke, and it was up to me to take care of her. I ended up having to drop out of school, and it made me very homebound, as she could not be by herself too long. At first, I loved it. Everyone was very nice and kind, from customers to the employees. The minimum wage thing didn't bother me too much, as I was happy to be making money for myself for once. All was happy and good until November that year. Around then, I knew what I was doing. The sandwiches, the prepping. I didn't have a problem with that anymore. I'd even made some friends, and I couldn't complain with my job. But every now and then, I would have this regular. Not surprising as I live in a small college town in the South. He was an athletic man, a toned one, but he had a strong lisp and would often converse with the men on our staff such as I. Personally, I didn't mind him at first. His jokes were okay, I'd guess. But it would seem that he had a deeper reason for making them. Now, I'm pretty dense and have problems picking up on social cues, but after I made his salad and he had left, one of my coworkers pointed out that the guy had been trying to hit on me. I laughed it off, but it kinda dwelled on me, to be honest. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't dwell on it because I have a problem with gays. I don't. In fact, one of my childhood mentors was obvious with it. He was a man I looked up to, and we shared the same humor. No, this guy, he was weird. As time would go on, I'd realize he was just hitting on me. And eventually, he would start calling the store and would usually request to talk to me. He would start asking me personal questions, like how my day was, if I'd eaten yet. Then he would start asking about my dog. At that point, I was angry, because how in the world did this stranger know about my dog? When he said that, I kind of broke. I told him to F off, and I told my manager what was up. Luckily, she took my side. She eventually blacklisted his number and had a no-serve order on him. Only a few of the employees even knew about the guy, and they were college kids my age. Usually getting drunk or high and are pretty reclusive, these college kids had no clue, and to this whole situation, they were equally as freaked out as I was. Luckily, we didn't see or hear from this guy again. That is, until he really crossed the line. One night, I was on the closing shift. It had been about 3 months in the freezing season of February. This dude had stopped coming here since around January, and my grandma had passed away recently, so my mind was focused on other stresses. It was really late, and I had skipped my break during a rush and was told to enjoy a 30-minute one before we closed. Not one to argue about a break, I stepped out back for a cigarette with my phone in hand. I'd been reading something my friend wrote for a minute when someone suddenly taps on my shoulder. I hadn't seen anyone out there. I thought I was alone. So when I felt that tapping, I jumped back and nearly crapped myself in the process. And when I saw who it was, I was far from relieved. It's the same guy, standing there in some tracksuit. I called him out, telling him he's not supposed to be here. He laughed this condescending laugh for a second, then asked me about my nieces. Now I live with my brother and sister, and I'm a very active uncle in their lives. They often see me as their older brother at times. When he mentioned them, my blood began to boil. He then asked me simply to hand over my phone and wallet. I refused, and more so, I told him to remove himself from the premises before I did it for him. Just then, the guy reaches into his track pants and pulls out a freaking crowbar. What went through my mind at first was to allow him to get the first hit, so I could hopefully dodge it or grab the weapon. But all in all, I wish he just wasn't there. Before this guy could make another move or attack me, whatever he was going to do, I noticed that my brother was sitting outside of his car. Now, my brother is no army guy or cop. He is a hardworking man and a determined hiker, and wherever he goes, he carries his 5.5-foot walking stick with him. He's kind of self-trained for self-defense. I mean, all you gotta do is whack him hard with the walking stick, right? Well, I stepped out slowly onto the parking lot with my hands up, and this guy was not far behind me. I looked towards my brother with an expression of distress, and that's when he noticed the guy. Getting out of his car, my brother grabs his stick, yelling while also beating it on the building wall, grabbing the man's attention. I honestly didn't know what he was going to do when he saw that. Would he realize that a crowbar might beat some walking stick and escalate things? Or would he simply give up? Well, when he saw my brother, he turned tail and ran away, and I let out a sigh of relief. Honestly, I didn't know what that guy was going to do. When we went back inside, I told my boss what happened, but she didn't seem to take it too seriously, or so I thought. Because about a week later, some of our usual boys in blue came in. We put on our gloves to make them a sandwich, but they told us that they weren't there for the sandwiches. Just to pass on the info to our boss that they caught the trespasser with 20 pills of stolen Xanax. I caught on quickly and agreed to pass it on, knowing the guy they meant was the one that attempted to attack me. It's been 3 months, and I've quit for reasons that were unrelated, but after contemplating the situation, I realized that I usually stand at the edge of the outside wall behind the store, making it pretty easy for anyone to just stand behind the corner unseen and watch me as I'm oblivious taking my break. Number 2. Closing shift at Subway. Submitted by Donutio. I'm 20 years old and I live in Canada. This story took place during the 2016 clown craze in October, about 10 to 20 minutes before my Subway store was going to close. To make things a little easier to understand, I've got to give a brief explanation of the layout of our store. So there's the front door that customers walk through, which is completely made of glass. Then there's the windows to the left, if you're standing behind the counter facing the front. The bathroom is beside the swinging door that employees use to get to the sandwich unit. This all began while I was finishing doing dishes in the back room. I was the only person there because they rarely had more than one employee for the closing shift, unless of course it was for training purposes. Really, only one employee is needed, even though it might not be a smart decision. There hadn't been any customers for a while, and I really had to go to the bathroom, so I started making my way to the swinging door by the sandwich unit, when all of a sudden I heard the bell ding at the front door, indicating that a customer had entered. I was honestly a bit annoyed because I'd been putting off going to the bathroom for a long time, and obviously I can't leave someone unattended in the front store. Before I even turned around to take the person's order, and I know it's going to sound odd, but I heard the generic sound of a clown's nose honking. It sent shivers and goosebumps through my entire body. As I hesitantly turned around, to confirm what I had just heard. There was someone standing at the door with a bright orange afro and white face paint. Beyond that, they were dressed extremely casually, though in a plain green zip-up hoodie and black jeans, which almost made it creepier. They stared at me and smiled from ear to ear. Before I could even think of doing anything, they gave me a sinister little wave before quickly running out of the store and around the left side window. I was frozen in place. I was wondering, was this really happening? Or better yet, why was this happening? I didn't know the clown craze reached my small town. I just stared at the window for what felt like 10 minutes. Once I came to, I ran to the front door and just locked it. There was no way I was letting anyone in, even if we weren't closed yet. But before I did, I poked my head around the corner to make sure that lunatic was gone for sure. Well, I didn't see anything. He was gone, I thought. I couldn't see him anywhere. The parking lot was empty save for my car. So I went back in the store and locked the doors, counting the seconds until the actual closing time was here. But not 10 minutes until closing, a couple of cops were knocking at the door. I was nervous, yet relieved to see them. I immediately unlocked the doors and let them inside. Apparently, they were there to just ask me a few questions. They wanted to know if I had seen someone dressed with an orange afro and white makeup. Yeah, I was excited to tell them that some creep was out there so that they could catch this guy. Well, they explained that someone called not too long ago, saying that they drove by and saw someone matching that description in the subway parking lot, kneeling behind a green sedan. They were holding a carving knife. My heart seemed to stop. That was my car. This psycho was waiting for me behind my car. If the cops hadn't scared him away by showing up, he'd still be out there. What would have happened if I walked out there alone at closing time? I was scared more than I'd ever been, but the cops offered to walk me to my car and even check it if I needed them to. I happily obliged. Then I got out of there and stayed the night with a family member nearby, because after that horrific experience, I couldn't be alone. The clown craze was always hilarious in my eyes until something actually happened to me. There was just something horrifying about the contrast of the clown hair and makeup, along with normal everyday clothing. Better yet, what would have happened if I was already in the bathroom, defenseless and unaware? I'm so thankful I held it for as long as I did, and that some stranger drove by and saw this weirdo. I'm happy that I didn't find out what this lunatic was capable of. You can bet I don't work the closing shift at Subway anymore. Number 3. Subway Spooks. Submitted by Michael T. Back when I was just out of college, me and a friend of mine, let's call him James, decided to eat at a Subway. After all, it wasn't far from James' little apartment he lived at. When we arrived, I could already feel this weird vibe of the place. This was a little normal, since James lives in a poor, run-down part of the city, so I normally felt like this when I drived around this area. Well, we went inside the Subway and it was pretty normal. I ended up getting a tuna and James got a steak and cheese. And all of a sudden, this guy walks in. He was really pale and skinny and was wearing a dirty wife beater with ripped track pants. He was balding and looked to be around 40 or 50 years old. He came up to the man working behind the counter, then just stood there staring right at him, doing literally nothing, just staring. Me and James were a little freaked out about this, and we felt a little bad for the guy working behind the counter, but we tried to ignore him while we ate our sandwiches. It was none of our businesses at the time. Around 1 minute later, the men working the counter decided to try and get the man out, since the guy was obviously not there for an order. Besides, the place didn't have much of security, no guards or cameras, so someone this sketchy could have been a liability. The guy came around the side when the creepy man suddenly ran out of the store. I mean, he bolted. But as he ran out, he passed us, and he locked eyes with me. It gave me a very nervous feeling. I just wanted to blend in with the background and enjoy my sandwich. But there this weird guy was, making a scene and looking right at me as he ran past and exited the store. He managed to get out of the store without a hassle. Though he looked at me as he exited, he never even looked in front of him, yet he didn't trip or run into anything. This guy was some kind of freak. 5 minutes later, we heard a car alarm go off really nearby, and maybe 10 seconds later, I realized what was happening. I saw lights coming from the window exactly where I parked my car. It wasn't that great of a car, but it's all I could afford at the time. So I ran out of the store along with James, and we were honestly about to beat the crap out of the person who was trying to break in our car. But when we got outside, nobody was there at my car. So we decided to call it a night before anything else crazy happened. We hopped in my car, not even finishing our food. We didn't even want to at that point, and we were about to drive off. But the moment the car started and the headlights turned on, we saw him. The creepy guy from the subway was in front of our car now. I had no idea where he'd been hiding before, but I swear to God we didn't see him. He was about to jump on the hood of my car. He must have been some junkie or something, since he didn't jump until we backed out. We sped off on the way to James's place until he said he didn't want to go home. He lived too close to the subway, and the last thing he wanted was that guy to see where he lives. I couldn't say I blamed James. I think I would have done the same thing, but it was weird coming from James because he was the bravest person I knew. So I told him that he could stay at my place, then we went home. Honestly, that was the last I saw of this creepy subway guy. I don't know what was wrong with him, and I've never seen him again. But probably because of him, I'll never be going back to Subway. At least, not that one. Number 4. Subway Cashier. Submitted by Blue Topaz. One scary day, my mom and I went to Subway for a quick snack. When we reached our destination, we got out of the car and went inside. Inside, I sat at a table near the only window there. I'd always liked the window seats. My mom was ordering, and I was just watching like the little stalker I was. But as I watched my mother deal with the cashier, the situation seemed to get weird. I could hear them talking from where I was, when I suddenly heard the words sex and children. I was starting to get nervous, so I went up to the counter and rested my arm on my mom's head. I'm a lot taller than my mom. The cashier looks at me with an angered look and says, "Who the F are you?" I hadn't even said or done anything, and he's treating me like that. I'd gone to anger classes before, and I did pretty well. But even still, it took everything I had just to say, "I'm her son." Why? I wanted to say so much more to someone that rude. The cashier was wide-eyed. "He's your son?" My mother said yes. Then the cashier pretended that nothing happened, even though I wanted to snap his freaking neck. My mom saw my anger and said to calm down. I just didn't know why this guy was being so disrespectful. The cashier is staring at something under the table, and I look suspiciously at him and look over the table. The cashier noticed me looking at him, so he lifted his head up fast, like he was looking at something in secret. I was still trying very much to fight the anger from this rude person. I don't know what he and my mom had been talking about, but he still had no reason to treat us like he did. Suddenly, and I still have no idea what set this guy off, maybe he was crazy, he pulls out a pistol that he had apparently taped under the counter, and he began to point it at the two of us. And when he did, I let anger take over me, and I jumped over the counter and began fighting with this guy. I felt like if I didn't, someone was going to get hurt, and I wasn't going to give up until that gun was out of his hand. Taking quick glances to check on my mother, she seemed extremely surprised, and she was still like a statue. As I'm struggling with the cashier, he whips the arm holding the gun toward my head, and I flinch and feel something smash into me. It hurts, but I don't stop fighting with this man. My mom at this point was running out of the store, and before I knew it, I feel another crushing thud against the back of my head, and then everything slowly got dark. I came to in a hospital bed. Confused, I got up, but at that moment, the only thing I felt was pain. I dropped myself back onto the bed. A doctor walked in and said that I had a concussion. He told me not to worry, that I'd be fine within about a month. All I have to say is that I'm glad I didn't get shot. We are, along with several others, pressing charges against this freak. Apparently, the guy just snapped, and no one knew he had been hiding a weapon in the store. Number 5. Subway Watcher. Submitted by Orion. I'm here to share with you a really strange story. This is not my own experience, it's my friend's story. And let's call him James. James has been working at a Subway for a year, and he really hates his job, but it pays pretty good. Well, on February 11th of 2016, he almost quit, because he was just having a regular day until this one customer comes in. It's a big guy, very rough looking. He welcomes the guy, saying that he'd be with him in a moment, because he had to finish up another order. Eventually, they get to his order, and James rings him up at the register. Once everything is done, he hands the guy his sandwich bag. But the guy doesn't move. He doesn't try to take the sandwich. He tries to get the man's attention. Maybe he just zoned out for a second. But the guy completely stops. He doesn't blink. He's just staring straight ahead into nothingness. James was wondering what happened, because it looked like the guy glitched, as if he was an android that stopped working. James even clapped his hands in front of the man to see if he would blink, but he didn't. He didn't react to anything. Freaking out, James runs to his manager to see what needed to be done. Maybe this guy had a health condition. Maybe they needed to call an ambulance. For all James knew, he was having a strange seizure or something. But as he and the manager approach the front of the store, the man isn't there, and the sandwich bag is still on the counter. The manager is annoyed, thinking that James made this up to freak him out. But James is serious, so he talks the manager into showing him the tapes to prove his point about how weird this guy was. They go together since the store was closed to check the security footage. And get this, the guy never shows up on the tapes. James was dumbfounded when he saw it, because there was James making the sandwich for no one. Now, my friend may be a stoner every other weekend when he can, but he's definitely never been known to hallucinate. He still doesn't know what happened that day. By all means, I'm not saying Subway is a bad place. Where would I be without their meatball subs? Probably less fat. But we all know what happens when too many risky people gather into one place. There's bound to be those people whose brains just don't tick right. Those people who don't come there for the subs. They come there for a different kind of prey. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to send us your search and rescue stories, or your creepy first responder story soon at deathbyfear.com. Or if you've got a story at all, don't be afraid to share it either. All creepy stories are welcome. Thank you.